Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts. O'Reilly.
You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan Maiden,
But what's more impressive to me about the
Chase
fact
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I gotta get
Chris Dowhouse,
Get him, Chase.
and Adam
No,
LaRue.
not necessarily, but it's again the same.
Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
And we're back in preseason form, no less. That's why we're getting the drops right. All right, it's still July. All right, it's last day of July, but it's still July, so it's okay. We'll get it all worked out by the time the season starts. Operation Domination finally back. It took us the entire month to get back on our regularly scheduled programming of 9:30 p.m. on Wednesday nights, live on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Network. You also check us out on the go on any podcast app. Look for Operation Domination Football. I'm Dan Mader. I'm joined with Adam LaRue, Chris D, Chase Thornton. Boys, we're back in action, and we have training camp news to get through. So we have a wide variety show we're about to hit you with, and it's going to be oh so exciting. Fantasy football news, ADP moves, training camp updates, rookie targets, breakout candidates, and much more all throughout today's show. So I don't have any time to waste. Let's dive into the top news of the day. All right, so breaking news at the top, Rashad Penny retired. Oh, that wasn't the lead you thought I was going to go with?
Oh.
All right, guys. Yeah, Rashad Penny did retire. Oh, we don't have to talk about that anymore. The lead real news of the day, of the week really, is DJ Moore signing a 4-year, $110 million contract, 27.5 annual. And I think even more shocking than that was the fact that it's the highest paid contract the Chicago Bears have ever played a player, which was hysterical. And they brought that up. Made sense when he thought about it. They haven't had a quarterback to really pay. I'll kick this to Adam because this doesn't affect really his draft status for fantasy football purposes 2024. But dynasty wise, what does this do in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, you've effectively tied Caleb Williams or DJ Moore to Caleb Williams for at least the duration of Caleb's rookie contract. So I think that is certainly big in and of itself. You know the quarterback that you're going to get, right? There's no uncertainty on what situations DJ Moore may find himself in, 2-3 years down the line. You have a pretty good idea because this is a pretty hefty price tag, and this does feel very similar to what the Texans are doing now with Stroud, where it's like, all right, we have a rookie quarterback. We believe in him. Now let's make sure that there's plenty of weapons. Let's make sure that they're all paid. Let's make sure they're all happy. Now let's go get it. This feels like, obviously a step behind because Caleb's a rookie, but nonetheless, it feels like they see things similarly. So I think if you're a DJ Moore owner, you're stoked, especially if you're also are someone who believes in Caleb Williams as the quarterback of the future for the Bears.
Yeah, well, not just Caleb Williams, but also it lines up with when Rome Odunze's contract would be up. So if they need to make that switch where they can only afford to pay one, they may be able in a position to do that. Just speaking of wide receivers, I'm not going to get any fantasy analysis up here, but just keep everybody updated. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk all holding out or holding in. There was some speculation going on late last night that maybe CeeDee Lamb was going to announce a new deal soon. I saw numbers like 4 years, $136 million getting floated out there. But as of now, July 31st at 9:30 at night on a Wednesday night with Operation Domination. No contract has been signed to this point, so we continue to wait on those. I'll just throw this out here. I'm not worried yet, but as we get into mid-August, we're still talking about these receivers not being practicing. We may be doing some adjustments there on our fantasy board. Come back after us after the Expo. This next time we'll be back going live. Joe Mixon, he's missed a week of practice with the first was a hamstring. Now it's a quadriceps injury, considered to be minor. We're not really worried about Dameon Pierce taking over the backfield at any point in time. So just to kind of keep you guys updated with that. How about the news about Javonte Williams? Because we didn't really get a chance to go into this, Chris. Javonte Williams, according to reports, slimmed down. Sean Payton singing his praises. So what do you make of that when you had all the beat reporters talking about how Javonte Williams was going to be on the bubble heading into training camp? And now it doesn't seem like that's so much the case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's much the case to begin with, or, just reporters want to find something to kind of talk about, but I'm not really excited about it, Dan. I mean, losing 10 pounds, Javonte Williams wasn't a guy who was super out of shape. If anything, I'm more excited about him having a full year after the major surgery, him and being, having this whole off season to actually be getting healthy and getting physically well. So that's more what I'm excited about than, hearing about some guy losing 10 pounds. Javonte Williams wasn't a guy that I was worried about being too fat.
Just need a better knee and you'd be more explosive. But hopefully maybe the weight and the extra year will get, North Carolina Javonte Williams, what Sean Payton talked about wanting to see and what I've always wanted to see out of him as well. Roman Wilson taken off on the cart. It wound up being an ankle injury. And frankly, I don't really care who the number 2 receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers is, because it's either Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and Arthur Smith calling plays. So I don't care about that for 2024 purposes.
Well, Dan, Adam cares, though. Adam was probably almost petrified that he might lose his way.
Redraft? Is it redraft you actually care for Roman Wilson, Adam?
No, just for my own personal life. I really was hurt. He potentially was hurt. But for redraft, no, I don't care at all.
Okay, we cleared it up. I just wanted to make sure. I know you love your Roman Wilson boy. Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, while James Cook, who's back now, was out for a couple days of practice. Ray Davis and Ty Johnson both split first-team reps evenly. Chase, do you look at this as a good thing or a negative thing for the rookie running back, who I have to figure the Bills rather see take that number 2 job?
It doesn't worry me at all. It's that time of year when everybody's running with the ones. Oh, get excited about everybody. Listen, Ray Davis should have this number 2 spot locked up. He should have, if they do decide to transition to like a goal line role for anybody on that roster, it'll be Ray Davis. I'm not worried about it at all. I'm still not necessarily targeting him yet in redraft until we see, or unless we see something different than how they've handled things in the past, or unless we hear that he's taking reps away from actually Mr. Cook. But until that happens, no, I mean, this is somebody's got to run with the ones.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, they got to have somebody there, and that's their next 2 guys up.
I personally look at it as a positive. You're a 4th-round rookie. Ty Johnson's been a long-time vet. You're already at the point where they trust you enough to at least split the first-team reps. I think that's a good thing for Ray Davis overall. Dylan Labe, or however you want to pronounce his name, because it's been pronounced 5,000 different ways since the draft has taken place. He was earning a couple of first-team reps, and not getting carried away here in practice. Now, yes, it's just a couple of reps. I just think it's significant because right now you go on most projected team depth charts, and that's all they are right now is projected team depth charts. There's nothing definitive. Yeah, he's 4th technically behind Alexander Madison and behind Amir Abdullah. And I've kind of maintained this point, and I don't care who jumps in on this one, but I've kind of maintained the point of, I think we know Zamir White is close to, if not a 0 in the passing game. We know what Alexander Madison is. We know what Amir Abdullah is. I do see a scenario in which Labe could carve out to be the 3rd down pass catching back, which could be mildly interesting for fantasy purposes. I don't know if anybody else feels that way or differently.
I don't know if it's all that. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Chris. I just don't find it all that interesting unless you found Amir Abdullah interesting to begin with. But go ahead.
Well, no, Chase, I was going to let you definitely comment. I was just going to point out to Dan that he is taking the majority of the 3rd down, touches. So he is going to be that 3rd down role. That seems to be what they're kind of looking for, not necessarily the early downs, but that 3rd down role. So Chase, does that change your opinion at all?
No. I mean, like I said, if you found Amir Abdullah interesting the last couple of years because that's the role that he's kind of filled for them, then this is interesting to me. Otherwise, I didn't find anything exciting about Laube going to the Raiders in the first place. I wasn't necessarily as high as I think Dan and maybe some of you guys were in the lead up to the draft process. It's a great story. He's a nice little player. For fantasy purposes, I don't think he's going to be relevant here to worry about, especially this season.
Here's the thing I'll push back a little bit on it real quickly. Amir Abdullah, while that was his role, quote unquote, he never really got that many snaps when it came down to third down. I think Dylan Wabi's in a position where he could actually get more snaps when those situations pop up, but we will see. It's still early in the process. This I found interesting and not interesting at the same time, but Royce Freeman seems like, if you listen to Stephen Jones, more secure of a spot than even Rico Dowdle or anybody else in that backfield, which I just think is interesting because most fantasy analysts to this point have you believe that Rico Dowdle was at a point where he's pushing Zeke for touches. And that's not so much. Chris rolls your eyes, and Chris, I'm with you. Like, I never thought Rico Dowdle was that good in the first place, so I don't know why we're blowing smoke up that chimney to begin with. But let's get Adam in here because he hasn't talked in a little bit. What do you make of that situation there?
O'Reilly.
You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts. O'Reilly.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Yeah, I don't think it's that much of a surprise. Look, I think if I do like Dowdle, I think he's an interesting bet in certain situations. But let's be honest with ourselves. The case was always going to be Zeke gets the first opportunity, and if it's not explosive enough, that's when Dowdle becomes interesting. Otherwise, he's just going to be a fun little change of pace where we all go, but he's getting 5 yards per carry, play him more, and then he plays more, and then he goes down to 3.5 because he's not actually that good. But I think he could be a fun gamble, could be a fun player to watch this year, but let's not get ahead of ourselves too crazy. He was never going to take the lead over Ezekiel Elliott. That was never going to be the case.
Yeah, we're just going to watch 3 yards and a cloud of dust, whatever comes out of that backfield, whether it's Royce Freeman or Ezekiel Elliott. Isaac Guerrero will miss multiple weeks with a hamstring injury. That was the 49ers' 4th-round pick. Some thought maybe he would push for the number 2 spot, but actually it's been either Jordan Mason or Elijah Mitchell. Really only interesting if something were to happen to Christian McCaffrey. I just put it out there. I do think Jordan Mason has a legitimate shot to take this lead. They love Elijah Mitchell. I love Elijah Mitchell, but he gets hurt along with everybody else as soon as he touches the ball. So with that issue there, Jordan Mason getting a little bit better. I think it's a little bit interesting when you're trying to figure out the rest of that depth chart behind CMC, but we don't have to get too much into that. Let's dive in to our risers and fallers from week 1 of training.
Will Isaac Guerrero be an Eagle by that next year or mid-season? What are we thinking? 2 years.
2 years. It takes 2 years. Took Trey Sermon 2 years. It takes 2 years to get over to be a Philadelphia Eagle. All right. Yeah. So let's get into our risers and fallers. So this were the biggest risers and fallers ADP wise that I came across from the very first day of training camp to this past Monday. That's what I'm running this off of here. So I noticed a couple of things. So far, the biggest fallers, and we got to kick this to the Packer fan because it was all the Packer receivers with the exception of Jaden Reed here. Christian Watson went from wide receiver 40 to wide receiver 44, down 13.3 overall spots. Datavian Wicks dropped 14.2 overall spots. Romeo Doubs dropped 12.3 overal stops. So what's going on in Green Bay there? No one likes your receivers anymore after
Sam
Jordan Love
Clifford
gets paid? Sam Clifford, Chris?
Listen, it's kind of ridiculous to me. And I don't think I'm saying this just as a Packer fan. I think I'm saying this as somebody who's looking at fantasy football. So Christian Watson now is the wide receiver 44. So not only do people not believe he's a number one wide receiver, which, okay, with his injury history, I get if you're a little worried about that, but somehow we're saying that there are at least 11 number two wide receivers on other teams who are better bets this season than Christian Watson. Y'all are being stupid out there. Sorry. I don't mean to, step on anybody's toes in the listenership, but come on, wide receiver 44 overall. And he's falling even farther. Come on. Let's buck that up. Now, if you're scared about Dontavian Wicks because he's the fourth wide receiver on this team and could be the fifth or sixth option in the pass game, I can understand that. I still don't see why you want to let these guys fall, though. Here's the thing. We know this is going to be a high volume pass attack, and we saw these guys all be usable at points last season. That's where there's value to be had. I know that this is a crowded wide receiver room right now. There are a couple of crowded wide receiver rooms in this league, but if something happens to any one of those guys, now everybody else has even more opportunity there. It's a high volume pass attack. I don't get Christian Watson being wide receiver 44 in the first place, but I especially don't get these guys falling. And the reports out of camp about Romeo Doubs and how he's looking so far this preseason, again, we don't put a ton of stock into what people say, but we've seen Romeo Doubs already look like a usable fantasy asset the last 2 years in this pass offense. We know he's going to get a ton of looks in this game, and we know that he can catch the football. He's looking really explosive. They said this season, he's looking like a number one receiver in his own right. If Watson can stay healthy and they can pair that up with Doubs, there's fantasy gold to be had there. And if everybody else wants to let them fall, you guys out there in our listener land need to jump on that because that's where value can be had.
I blame Bo Melton.
Yeah, where's his ADP?
That's the problem. Is there's too many receivers in general. Chase, I'm with you. First of all, as far as I'm concerned, ADP wise, let them fall because I'm already.
I'll jump on it.
Christian Watson anywhere I can get him anyway. I got him up at wide receiver 34 in my rankings, and I have him in a tier. He's in my tier 8 of wide receivers with Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown. Rashee Rice may be moving to the top of that tier, even the next tier if we're really not going to get a suspension. I'm still waiting on that bit, but I feel pretty good about Watson in that group of guys we're talking about as low end wide receiver 3s who have upside. And that's how I look at Christian Watson. So yeah, he's a great value. That's why I had to bring him up here, of course, with all the other Packer receivers. But I'm going to make this comment. There's been as a position, there's been a major decline, which I think speaks to more so, maybe Chris and Adam, you can help me out with this one. I think it speaks more so to we're officially transferring ourselves out of best ball into redraft leagues because the wide receivers of a unit have been taking hits within the week. And if listenership, if you can bear with me for a second, I'm going to read off these names kind of quickly. Brandon Cooks down 14.2 spots. JSN down 14.2 spots. Rashee Rice down 11.7 spots. Deontay Johnson down 11.2 spots. Calvin Ridley down 10.8 spots. DeAndre Hopkins down 10.8 spots. Cortland Sutton down 10.8 spots. And Brian Thomas Jr. down 10.5 spots. And the winner goes to, so all those wide receivers all took a major hit, double-digit hit from week 1 to week 2. So do we think it's just a matter of people are transferring from best ball to redraft, or people remembering that running backs are just as valuable in that tier? Go ahead, Chris and Adam.
Real quick, Dan, I was just going to say, I think it's remembering the running backs and how the tiers are really dropping off in certain places, and everybody wants to, zero RB and do different things. Suddenly people are stealing your zero RB or going a round or two earlier when you're going to wait for a guy to fall to you. And I think people are starting to recognize that there's a lot of receivers out there that you get your hands on. A lot of guys are similar after certain tiers, while the running back position has severe drops and a lot of question marks. So I think that's what you're seeing a lot of.
What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I think all of these things kind of play a little bit of the part of it. Like, it is partially moving to best ball. It is partially, oh, wait, when we get late in the draft, I really need a running back now suddenly. I really need that. And then, some of these other guys are faltering for it. I think part of it is, people get really attached to the names that are getting thrown out there in the news for some of these other guys who haven't really had that headline as of late. Or for, a Rashee Rice, it still just feels like it's in limbo. All of these guys are kind of having quiet times, not necessarily bad, but quiet. While other guys are having, oh my God, such and such is in the best shape of their life. Oh my God, they're looking really explosive this year in the Romeo Dobbs, but I think it's a combination of all of the above.
Yeah, I tend to agree. All right, so let's switch gears. Let's go to our risers here. Nick Chubb being a big one. After we just had, Chase, you and I just had this episode with Brian last week to talk about Nick Chubb, and everyone needs to kind of simmer down a little bit. Like, it's really going to be the second half of the season here, guys. Now he's jumped from RB35 to RB28. I thought I was high on him when I had him at RB30. Now ADP's pushing him even further up the board. Overall 107.5 to 88.3. So now we're talking in that 8th, 9th round territory for Nick Chubb. Not saying it's too high, but now you're talking about single digit rounds to the double digit take. Again, still doesn't have a timeline to return. His pup list is still more likely than not, which would force him to miss at least 4 games. This is still a complicated ACL injury. Chase, what's your take here?
Well, like we talked about with Brian last week, like I said, and it's going to be Jerome Ford until it's not. But when it's not, if Chubb is in shape enough to be back and be running, Nick Chubb has been one of the best fantasy running backs in the game since he came into the league. And I think a lot of people are hyped up about the idea. I mean, we've all seen the video of him squatting 5+ and that kind of thing. And we have all heard that, okay, he's supposed to be doing really well. But like you said, we don't have a direct timetable yet. Now, if you feel like by the 8th, 9th round, you're set enough everywhere else that you can take a shot at a guy like Nick Chubb, that's a hell of a midseason addition to get back to your squad. Almost, you hear it around we just had the trade deadline in baseball here this week, and you hear a lot of teams, oh, well, we're getting this guy back off the injured list. So it's almost like we're making a midseason acquisition. Nick Chubb would be a hell of a midseason acquisition. If you could pick somebody like that up off of the waiver wire, I think we all would do that in a heartbeat. Now you've got to be able to survive until he gets back. But if you feel like you're set by that time, I have no problem taking him because I have him ranked at 28 myself. And the only reason I have him ranked at 28 is because I expect him to be missing. Yeah. A month and a half of the season. He is worth the shot. I don't disagree with this ranking at all. I'm not going to give people the same, lecture that I gave them here over Christian Watson, not by any shot.
How dare you mention baseball when we're getting revved up for football? Baseball season's over. Okay, don't you know baseball ends on July 31st?
It was a poetic metaphor.
No,
English
it's not too far off from what I have here, and it still puts him in that 28, puts him in the same tier I would have had him anyway, surrounded by guys like Devin Singletary, who have him just ahead of, Jonathan Brooks, Brian Robinson Jr., Jalen.
You're not in a 12-team league. You're not taking him as a starting running back. If you're starting 2 running backs, he's going at 28. He's not going as the starting running back. If that ends up being a starting running back for you second half of the year and your first 2 guys hit, you're sitting pretty.
O'Reilly.
Save on your next oil change at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Choose Castrol Edge Full Synthetic Motor Oil to provide maximum performance and protection for your engine. Get a $15 gift card after rebate when you buy 5 quarts of Castrol Edge for $34.95. Plus 2 times O Rewards points. Offer valid in-store and online at O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Yeah, I just hope he doesn't go up any higher than this.
No, because I won't have him.
Other running backs who've greatly increased, no surprise here. J.K. Dobbins, he jumped up from RB51 to RB43. His overall ADP jumped up 14.3 spots. Gus Edwards was back in the mix today. They were splitting first-team reps evenly between the two, just like you would expect from Greg Roman and none less. Does this do anything for you guys? Adam, we'll go with you. Does this do anything for you as far as J.K. Dobbins getting more on your radar than he already was, or are you just still ignoring this situation?
I mean, maybe a touch, but the reality of the situation is that it's never been about talent for him. It's about actually, continuing to be on the field. I believe J.K. Dobbins is talented. Now, look, is it nice to be like, all right, well, cool, he's still talented after the nth injury, but otherwise, that was never my primary concern.
Yeah, I mean, Brian wasn't too big of a fan of it himself, but we'll have to see. I just think it's interesting. Whoever does emerge from that Chargers backfield, however, let's keep in mind, J.K. Dobbins is coming back from an Achilles injury. I know he's been great, but it's hard to imagine him taking off right out the gate. Let's put it that way, right out the gate. I'll just quickly mention TJ Hawkinson went from tight end 14 to tight end 13. There doesn't really much movement there, 14 spots overall ADP wise. But I want to get to this, a funny little side note, just so we know that redraft is finally here. Defense as a unit was the biggest increase from ADP. Defenses, I think the Washington Commanders defense, according to my calculation, shot up 102 spots. Just redraft is here, fellas. That's all I got to say. Hey, Chase, you got to read for us.
Sure do. Hey, everybody out there, ready to take your fantasy sports game to the next level? Well, welcome to the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. It's your ultimate destination for everything fantasy and sports gaming. Embrace a new era and escape the noise and negativity of fantasy sports, Twitter, and Reddit. Say goodbye to bots and ads and welcome to a space where genuine sports talk thrives. Immerse yourself in a new era of fantasy sports discussions where quality insights and pure enthusiasm reign supreme. Elevate your fantasy experience and join us on this exciting journey. From football to basketball and beyond, we've got all your favorite games covered. Whether you're a hardcore enthusiast or a casual player, there's something here for everyone. Discover polls, league classifieds, and tailor your feed with top-tier content from our creators, articles, videos, podcasts, everything conveniently at your fingertips. Boost your game with expert advice, earn points, and receive rewards for your sports expertise. Your insights can make a real impact here. So join a vibrant community of like-minded fans, share your draft strategies, discuss your winning tactics, and dominate your fantasy leagues together. Join the revolution. It's more than just a network. We're a dynamic team driven by passion and knowledge. Join us today and unleash your fantasy sports potential. Visit Fantasy Sports Advice Network now and download the app to start your winning streak. Find us all there. You can interact with every single one of us on it. It's social media for fantasy and only fantasy. We'll see you over there.
FantasySportsAdvice.com, guys. Go ahead and check it out. Okay, so now it's time for the danger zone. Adam, you're going to walk us through some players that maybe we want to avoid. We're going to hit some landmines. We were going to try to avoid those landmines. That's why you listen to shows like Operation Domination, to avoid those things. So, Adam, take it away for me.
You know, I really thought about, doing more of a dynasty focus segment or a bunch of other things. But I feel like on this show, I am typically very positive. I try to play the political answer, not really dog on people. So this segment is going to write that, and we're just going to be negative this entire time, and it's going to be great. These are the players that, for whatever reason, we're concerned about, right? And we're going to start off with the guys who we're scared about because of age, because of injury, or things of that nature. We've seen a bunch of times in the last few years. Dalvin Cook is probably the biggest example, literally a 4.4 thousand yard running back to nothing, like on two teams last year. So it's fairly often. Allen Robinson's another example a few years ago. It's fairly often that a guy just falls off out of nowhere, and we're trying to give our best guess on who those kind of guys could be. And maybe, a few months from now, we'll come back and look at this and see what happened. So started off, I threw out James Conner, who had a fantastic year last year. 5 yards per carry was the best year of his career. Is also not particularly athletic on an okay but not great offense. 29 years old. They just drafted what is likely an heir apparent. Some of his backups played well last year as well. And this is overall an offense kind of going through a bit of flux. This is a team that is looking for their identity. This is a team that is kind of in flux. They're trying to change things over. And look, I can accept gambling on Derrick Henry as an older running back having success. I can accept because he's special. And I can accept the special circumstances around an older running back like Raheem Mostert having success. The circumstances in Arizona are not special, and James Conner is not special. So for me, I'm going to bet against the 29-year-old running back. And that's the landmine that I personally am going to avoid in a tier where I do like some other running backs.
Well, if you guys ever checked out the NFC West, Bob Harris, you already know I'm on your side, Adam, when it comes to that debate, because I was the lowest here on James Conner. So I hear you there. Who do we want to go to next here?
Chase, let's kick it over to you. And let me just say, I looked before the show at both of your answers, and it just really broke my heart on both parts of the segment.
Yeah,
but take it away.
I'm gonna come for your team next, and Honestly, it didn't make me happy either being a Badger fan, but I've got Jonathan Taylor put down here. Now listen, Jonathan Taylor, we know, has the talent to be number one overall. We know that. We've seen him do that. But right now he's being taken at 10 overall as running back 5.5 PPR points per game setting here, which puts him in a first round grade. I don't have 5 running backs as first round grades this season. I am heavy on wide receivers in the first round here. His ECR is putting him at running back 4 even, and he's going right around that first and second turn there. But everybody's got him ranked here as top 5. And listen, I've got him up high too. I have him ranked 4 in my initial rankings preseason, but I'm worried about him going that high, and I'm not looking at him taking him that high. Last year, okay, 14.7 points per game. That was running back 8 on a points per game basis there, but we only got 10 games out of him. Okay. It was like 2022. He had the injury. He was coming off that, and he only had 12 points per game. He was running back 18 on a points per game basis. He was number 1 in ADP that year. So the number 1 overall player just absolutely flamed out and bombed for you. You only got 11 games out of him. Then last year, it's like we all overcorrected. We only took him as running back 19. And I just told you, he ended up running back 8 on points per game basis, but you only got 10 games out of him. The last 2 seasons, he has missed a full third of his games. If he can stay healthy this year, I'd like him to bounce back from that. I like his talent to rise to the top. But he's got Anthony Richardson there. I'm concerned about Anthony Richardson taking away some of those opportunities that Jonathan Taylor has had in the past. I'm concerned that teams are going to stack the box to stop the 2 of them until and unless Anthony Richardson can prove that he can pass it over the top on a consistent basis and make people fear that half of the equation. If Richardson gets hurt again, which, I mean, let's face it, we've seen him for about 8.5 minutes of game time here in his career. They're going to be bringing in Joe Flacco, whom nobody is scared of running. So now all of that box stacking would have to be completely tailored towards Taylor, to coin a phrase there. I'm just worried about that from that standpoint there. So I will not be taking him, and I'm not targeting him in the first round. If he fell to me lower than that, say the 3rd round, I would jump right on that. Like I said, I still have him as a top 5 back, but I'm not ready to spend a first round grade on him there because I think there's just too much risk here and too many questions around this offense for me to spend that high yet.
No, I think some of those concerns are fair. I mean, back-to-back, low games played seasons is tough. Although, to be at least a little fair, if I'm not mistaken, it was the same injury that caused the miss at the beginning of last season, the end of the season prior. But no, totally. I think 22 games over 2 years still isn't great.
Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
His backup's Trace Sermon. Okay.
Yep.
Oh yeah. There's no
he's getting
change of pace
volume through the freaking roof. So I'm not really Jonathan Taylor with RPO action and the volume he's about to see. I'm sorry, I got him as an RB4 and my number 9 player on my board.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna jump. No, I don't want to poo-poo anybody's thing because I want to give everybody a chance to, this is Chase's take. She's not as high on Jonathan Taylor, and absolutely understand. So just keep with the theme, Adam. I'm a little down on the guy in the backfield that he just talked about. That is Anthony Richardson. That's the guy I am concerned about. We all know the cheat code, and usually in NFL fantasy is rushing, but as Chase said, the guy's been healthy for about 8.5 minutes. He couldn't finish 4 games. He's played about 2.5 total games, I believe. When he's out there, he's been great. But then when you look at this guy who's already had problems in the offseason with the shoulder, it was still something they were kind of monitoring. We've seen people like Cam Newton's career go down the tubes with similar issues. Peyton Manning's another guy. I'm not saying it's going to happen to Anthony Richardson, but this is a guy that a lot of people are super high on as that quarterback that you want to kind of get your hands on after the top two or three guys. And this isn't a guy I'm going to be spending my draft capital on because I just don't trust he's going to be out there long enough. And then when he is, if he adjusts his style at all, he's not a rushing guy, I'm not trusting his carrying you and throwing the ball. So this is a guy that I'm a little bit concerned about just, with the Colts team in general. I'm not feeling freer about Jonathan Taylor, but Anthony Richardson is a guy with the injuries concerns. And going back to college, I still have a lot of concerns with.
Yeah, no, I think that would make sense again because he got hurt, completely separate injuries a handful of times. And he's someone that despite the freakishly small sample size we have is still going as a QB1 in 12-team leagues in a lot of cases. So I definitely hear you as much as, for me, I do think the gamble's worth it, but I definitely get it. Dan, you want to close us out here on our Dalvin Cooks, our Allen Robinsons, our aged out or injured out guys?
Yeah, I'm kind of keeping the same theme, the injured out, I guess, here with Kyren Williams. It's a twofold thing. Look, when they went into the season last year, okay, the plan was not for Kyren Williams to take over. There was supposed to be a mix of him and Cam Akers until, everything just fell apart with Cam Akers there at the end. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be a split. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying there's going to be a split week 1 with Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, but this is a legitimate running back behind Kyren Williams here. And Kyren's not coming in with a ton of draft capital, not coming in with a big body size for the type of workload he had last season, which led him to miss 5 games to begin with. And I'm somebody who is big on Blake Corum's fit and talent within that scheme, where if Kyren misses significant time, I think it's going to be hard to take Blake Corum off. Where even when Kyren comes back, I don't think he's going to assume a, let's say, 75% plus work share load like he was receiving last season if Blake Corum's over there producing. So with a guy who's getting drafted as a top 10 running back, as a borderline first round pick, usually high end second round pick, to have that kind of obvious, floor to his range of outcomes, it bothers me a little bit with Kyren Williams. So that's why he's one of the guys on my list.
Yeah, and I'm there because as much as, Notre Dame running back, which I am stereotypically in love with, I had him outside of my top 12 for exactly what you just said. I am worried about Corum. He was drafted because of how dreadful that offense was when those 5 games you mentioned. So I definitely hear you. All right, so if those 4 guys, James Conner, Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson, Kyren Williams, there are guys who we're pegging as, again, the Dalvin Cooks, the Allen Robinsons, the guys we're concerned about because of injury, because of age. Now we're going to talk about the number one example that comes to my head always, and there's been a Mike Davis every year for the past handful of years. Obviously, Mike Davis has been that guy, but we've had some other guys replace him, and that's what we're looking at now. The guy who either A, he's a potential landmine because of incoming competition. The guys around him are really good and he's going to potentially lose his job or lose snaps, or the guy who, all right, well, there's nobody else, so we're going to project in volume, but I don't actually think they're that good, which is, the Mike Davis part of it, who, all right, cool, he's getting 300 carries, but he's not that good, so it doesn't matter. So for that group of guys, and my, Mike Davis of the year nominee for this year will be running back Zach Moss. For my former backup running back who looked really good at the beginning of last year. And look, first of all, we saw at the end of last year that, it was kind of fluky at the beginning of the year when he played as well as he did. He came back and didn't look nearly the same when Jonathan Taylor, did miss some time later on. And second of all, this fit for him is atrocious. That's been my number one thing. I don't think he's necessarily a bad back. I think he's a solid pass protector. I think there's some things he does well, but I mean, he's just not someone who I think should be running behind this offensive line in like a zone heavy scheme, or like it just doesn't make any sense to me. Outside of, all right, let's get a good pass blocker for Joe Burrow, who, needs some time in the pocket, but this isn't, to me, he's not a Joe Mixon replacement. He's a replacement for, and the name's escaping me, but the back that left for the Broncos a couple years ago. Like, that is the role that he's actually good at, not playing the starting running back role here. It really feels like he's the name that went there in free agency. We're not ready to anoint Chase Brown yet, so we're just projecting him touches. I don't think he's good enough to get those touches. I really don't.
As someone who's ranking Chase Brown in his top 33 running backs, yeah, I love it, Adam.
That's a bold statement.
Yep. All right.
Well, we know Dan hates Zach Moss, so that's definitely a given. We already know that one.
This is a given. All right, Chase, rip my heart out one more time.
This bums me out too. I was high on Roma Dunze in the lead up to the draft. I love the fact that he went with Caleb Williams. I like that fit. I just don't like it for this year. I think that, he's not going super high. He's going as wide receiver 42. So he's being drafted as a wide receiver 4, which is good because I think there's this perception among all the fanboys that Dunze is going to just all of a sudden step into the league and take the league by storm. we just said DJ Moore just signed a monster ass contract. His targets are not going anywhere. Oh yeah. And the other guy that Rome Odunze has to compete with is a future Hall of Famer in Keenan Allen. Not just a future Hall of Famer, but a future Hall of Famer who, was amazing last year when he was on the field. 17.3 points per game in a half PPR setting last year. That was like third, fourth in the league among wide receivers. He had 108 receptions in only 13 games. This is not a guy who doesn't have it anymore. This is not a guy who was let go because, they didn't necessarily want him in Los Angeles. This is the guy who was let go because they're in a complete rebuild over there in Los Angeles, and they had no reason to keep him around at the price that knew they were going to have to pay for him. Rome Odunze is just not going to get the volume this year that he will need and that we would like him to have in order for him to be a usable fantasy asset. Now, something happens to one of the two guys in front of him, wheels up, let's go. Katie bar the door. But I will not be drafting him. I'm not looking at his way at all in redraft. He has a chance to convince me to take him in DFS later in the season. But again, it's probably going to take something to happen to one of the two guys in front of him, and I just don't see that happening. So as much as I love Rome Odunze, I think I thought he was the second best receiver overall, second best prospect in this draft behind Harrison. He's not the second best prospect in terms of workload and what he's going to do for you in a fantasy capacity this year. So
you just don't, as a Packers fan, you just aren't very high on the Bears offense.
No, I'm scared. I'm scared as hell that that they're going to have to deal with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze going and DJ Moore going forward. I just don't see Rome Odunze taking over for Keenan Allen. We had that argument a couple weeks ago when we talked about the NFC North. I seem to be the only guy who thinks that Keenan Allen isn't going to fall off the face of the fantasy earth among the four of us, but it's not going to happen.
I'm a believer in Keenan. I'm also a believer in Odunze, but I get you. Those are two, incredibly prolific wide receivers, two guys who have gotten some of the best target shares in the last few years. So I do get the concern with Odunze coming in. Dan, tell us, let's stay in the NFC North. Let's now you can hurt Chase.
Take a shot back.
I'm getting killed over here.
Adam's segment, we're all poo-pooing over his Notre Dame and Colt guys and everybody else he likes in between. Yeah, it's time to take a little shot. So we talked about Packers receivers who are dropping in ADP. And the one guy who stayed the same ADP-wise was Jayden Reed, which of all the players makes the littlest sense to me on the face of the planet. I mean, you're talking about a player who had a 17% target share last season, and the only reason he made his big wave for fantasy purposes, well, two reasons, really. One was his 8.6% touchdown rate, which led to 8 receiving touchdowns, which is an incredibly high mark to get when you're only getting 17% of the target share. He did tack on 2 rushing touchdowns. By the way, for the people out there who are trying to make a case that Jayden Reed is Deebo Samuel light, he only had 11 carries. Calm down. It's not even a carry a game. Deebo gets over 2 carries a game, okay? He's got a long freaking way to go to get that label on him. So that's number one. So not only is it more likely that we'll see a regression for touchdowns, but I don't know if his target share is necessarily going to increase. His big wave for fantasy was weeks 14 through weeks 18 when ding, 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 guess who wasn't playing? Christian Watson. So that's been the biggest thing for me is that it took a vacancy, a huge vacancy within that offense for Jayden Reed to be able to get his. He only had 1 game the entire season, and it wasn't during weeks 14 through 18 where he had more than 80% route share, which is typically what you have if you're even considered a starting wide receiver in the NFL. And we're talking about him being the highest ranked Packers wide receiver. I'm not buying it. I got him at wide receiver 40. I see too wild of a range of outcomes. That's a landmine to me.
No, I feel you. That's a weird wide receiver room to project, and that he's somehow this massive front runner. I mean, I think he is the best receiver, but that he is some massive front runner above the rest is a weird situation that's kind of coming up. But all right, Chris, take us home.
Yeah, so I may have cheated a little bit on this, Adam. I didn't look at some of the players that I'm down on necessarily. I'm looking at guys who I'm just tired of hearing about and just are pointless in fantasy in a sense. And so I'm going to focus on some couple of names right here. I'm going to call this my Sky Moore Awards. Justin Tolbert. Why do we care about Justin Tolbert? I keep hearing he could be the second receiver. He could be a third receiver on the Cowboys. He could be it's like Sky Moore repeat over and over again. I'm tired of hearing about Justin Tolbert. I don't think he's going to do anything. Nobody else. Brandon Cooks is barely involved. They talk about him falling down. Why are we even talking about Justin Tolbert, a guy who might lose his job to a seventh rounder or sixth rounder, and a guy who walked on last year in Jalen Brooks?
First of all, can we get his name right? It's Jalen Tolbert, not Justin.
That's how little he
Sorry,
matters.
Jalen Tolbert. That's why exactly. Thank you, Adam. That's how little he matters. It's Jalen Justin.
The guy literally is like on every practice report how he's lighting up every practice right now, and he's clear cut going to be.
I know
that was Simi Fehoko last year,
and that was Sky Moore for 2 seasons in Kansas City, and it's like Sky Moore, and then we all realize why are the other guys didn't have a chance with this job. The one that also goes, 2 other names to go with that real quick are Michael Wilson. I keep hearing about Michael Wilson in Arizona. He's going to step up. Michael Wilson was a 3rd rounder, was being on the other side of Marvin Harrison, all the different weapons in Arizona. Michael Wilson's going to be a pointless guy. He's another guy that I just don't even understand why we're talking about. I don't think he's all that talented. But when we're talking about Greg Dortch already, beating you for targets in practice, and Zach Pascal and Jones. I mean, go down the list. There's 4 or 5 other guys who are going to get the ball before this guy does, and that's sad because none of those guys are anybody special except for Marvin Harrison. But this guy's just I'm tired of hearing about Michael Wilson. And finally, Xavier Leggett. We were down in Carolina for the draft. We pissed a lot of people off down in Carolina with our takes on some of the receivers, particularly Xavier Leggett, a guy who they traded up for in the 1st round. This is Jonathan Mingo part 2, except for Jonathan Mingo actually already stole his job. Jonathan Mingo's out there running with the ones. I know we're not excited about necessarily who's running the line, Chase, and I agree with that. But I think it's pretty, eye-opening when you already have a guy who's guaranteed to be out there in Deontay Johnson. Adam Thielen was a top receiver last year, and Mingo, who's looking pretty good, and even Terrence Marshall's getting some run with the first string versus Xavier Leggett, who's kind of we talked a lot about, we're excited about, I guess, but I think we all agreed was a guy that was a one-trick pony in college and isn't really showing his skill set necessarily in the pros.
No. Xavier's going to be awesome this year, so keep letting Deontay Johnson fall if you're drafting with me.
Great point.
Everyone out there. Keep letting that happen.
Shout out to Nino Pina, who's coming into the show. If you can hold on, Nino, we are going to actually talk about the Chargers wide receivers here in the last segment. So stick with us, asking about the hype going around about Ladd McConkey recently. And with that, I think that caps off your segment there, Adam. Am I correct?
You are correct.
All right. So with that, let's go into the difference makers. This one's for Chris. He's got a few questions to talk about rookies we're targeting and breakout candidates that we're thinking on our list. So Chris, take it away.
Yeah, so this part of our show is going to be difference makers, and we're looking at how to dominate by design. We've lots of tips of things that we're looking for players-wise. So these rookies, we've done a lot of, we covered them in the draft. We've talked a lot at length about with them in training camp and rookie camp, what they've been bringing to the table. So I'm going to ask you guys, what rookie are you guys targeting the most? And we'll start off with Adam. Adam, what rookie are you targeting the most in redraft?
You're going to hate me because I'm going to do it again. Look, I am happily going to walk away with Jermaine Burton in the last couple rounds of drafts. That receiver spot has had value. We've seen, injuries with T. Higgins. We, have seen a bunch of different things with T. Higgins as far as injuries, as far as contract, as far as, is he going to go to another team? There's been so many question marks with him. And when he was on the field last year, he didn't really play that well, even with, Joe Burrow. Now, obviously, injuries played a part of that on both his part and Joe Burrow's. But nonetheless, outside of Jamar Chase, I don't know how confident I am in this receiver room. Again, I think T. Higgins is a really good player, but, to say that it's locked in, that he's this, going to be fantastic, lights out this year, I'm not necessarily sure that I'm there. I am confident in him as a player long-term, but, things happen. And look, I think Jermaine Burton has a really good fit regardless of T. Higgins. I think, he's another dynamic deep threat for when, if you're shading guys over on Jamar, great. You have another guy that can break open deep. And he's so far, reports out of training camp are positive. And he's a guy who, look, I think most concerns for him were character related. It sounds like, between former Bengals and current Bengals, he's getting a lot of mentorship. So I loved him coming in. I have seen no reason to move off. So he's someone that I think is a sneaky flyer for me that I'm going to keep running with.
So Adam's going Jermaine Burton, a guy that, isn't on a lot of redraft. And I think we can, I'll just say this, Adam. I think I could tell you play a lot of dynasty football.
We need to make a drinking game where we take a shot every time Adam mentions Jermaine Burton or Audric Estime, because it's like every episode. I'm just saying, buddy.
Well, I like the drinking game, but I also think it's a really interesting take, and that's the guy that all different rookies we talked about is definitely a guy that's off the radar. So I'm going to go to you, Dan. What rookie are you targeting the most in redrafts?
This is a no-brainer for me. It's Jaden Daniels. I'm 10 spots higher than ECR right now. I got him ranked at 78th overall, and that's 29 spots higher than ADP. And I just don't get, when you have a quarterback who has the upside of a Kyler Murray, of an Anthony Richardson sitting there like that 5-6 turn right now on most ECR boards, because he's going to have the rushing, and we do know he at least has a decent deep ball with wide receivers like Terry McLaurin to be able to throw to. We'll see we get a Jahan Dotson and Luke McCaffrey. Again, I just go back to it. Kyler Murray was a top 5 quarterback with Cliff Kingsbury. I don't see a big difference in their skill set of how they're going to approach the game between Jaden Daniels and Kyler Murray. And you're talking about a guy you're going to be drafting as QB 11, QB 12, home league drafts. It might even be later in double-digit rounds. So for me, it's no brainer. It's been Jaden Daniels. I think I've had him in almost every single draft.
So Dan's looking for that quarterback edge and going Jaden Daniels. How about you, Chase?
You son of a... You took mine, but no, because I agree with you. Jaden Daniels is everything that I think we all want to be getting in Anthony Richardson for a much more palatable draft price. And I'm not as worried about him getting injured as I am right now with Anthony Richardson. Not saying I won't take a shot on Richardson at some point, possibly, but Jaden Daniels was mine. So I'll zig when you guys are zagging here, to take a phrase from Chris there. Jonathan Brooks is, listen, rookie running backs we know can have a big impact in this league. We know that they can come in and they can be impactful and they can be successful right away. If he shows that he's healthy enough to be out there from the get-go, he was the best running back prospect in this draft by far. He's going to be the top weapon on that offense when they run the ball. I think that he's going to be a nice outlet as they try to right the ship with Bryce Young there. So I think he'll be a nice little dump off target there for him as well. So Jonathan Brooks will be somebody that I will be keeping an eye on there as well. Although Dan did steal my guy with Jaden Daniels.
Going Jonathan Brooks, we're kind of skipping some, this draft class is no about receivers, other than Jermaine Burton. We're kind of skipping over the receivers as guys we're targeting.
Price, dude.
I'm going to go with you guys, and I'm going to skip over the receivers as well, and I'm going to go with Caleb Williams, the other quarterback. Look, we talked about Jaden Daniels, the cheat code, the legs. Caleb Williams can skip around a little bit too. We've seen what C.J. Stroud did last year. I'm not going to say Caleb Williams is going to be C.J. Stroud, but what I can say is I think Caleb Williams actually could be better than C.J. Stroud. I think with the weapons he has in place, he has better than receivers starting off right off the bat. I like what he has weapons-wise, and I think Caleb Williams is one of those guys who is one of the top talents that we've seen in the last decade. And to remind people of that, we all got down on him, last year, what kind of happened to USC. Maybe he's not as good as we thought he was. We're going to see. Well, I think we're going to see this guy's going to come out with guns blazing with the 3 receivers that he has, a nice backfield. And I love Caleb Williams as a guy that, as Dan talked about, is my quarterback. I go a little bit higher than most people because he's that guy I like as an option as a starting quarterback this year as well. So let's go for other rookies we're talking about.
We got a question coming in from Bird here. He's in a 12-team Superflex league. It's a 1-keeper league. He's got the 5th pick, and he wants to know, would we keep Henry, assuming Derrick Henry, in the 2nd round, Debo in the 4th, or Tua in the 5th round? I'm probably the wrong guy to ask this, because to me it's Debo in the 4th round because he's a top 12 wide receiver on my board. So that's the value pick for me. Although Tua in the Superflex league in the 5th isn't too far off either. So that's why I would lean rapid fire. Chase, Chris, then Adam.
I'm Tua.
No, yeah, I'm agreeing with you that it's Debo. You keep the best player in this situation. Don't overthink it too much. As if you think that quarterbacks are going to be very, very scarce, you could think about keeping Tua, but Debo's the best player on that board. Take it.
Consider Tua.
Yeah, I'm going Tua. I'm super flex. I'm always going to try to get the quarterback, and especially a guy that has upside like Tua does.
Adam.
Tua.
Tua. Okay. The 2 for 2. Yeah, can't argue that again. Superflex 5th round quarterback. Hard to argue there. I'm just kind of curious. The Superflex leagues, and I'm playing a number of them. Chris, there's somebody you're big on. Caleb Williams, that you just mentioned, might be going in around the same territory. Maybe even the 6th round.
Then I'm loading up on both. Bring it.
I'm assuming he's taking a quarterback before that. That was just my thought. Yeah.
Superflex.
Only Jordan Love is getting kept for a quarterback. So, okay. Well, that's that. If there's more quarterbacks on the board, like I said, I would lean more towards Debo, but I think Debo or Tua are your answers there. Okay, Chris, go ahead.
All right. So we talked about the rookies. And Adam, this one we have to kind of, make sure that you don't cheat necessarily. And we're looking at where we have the greatest ADP difference on where we have our rookie versus the rookies that, where everybody else is taking them. So we know Jermaine Burton is obviously your answer, Adam, because you're way higher than ECR ADP in the whole world than Jermaine Burton. But outside of Jermaine Burton, what other rookie are you considerably higher or lower? It doesn't have to necessarily be a positive thing. We can stick with your negative thing. Higher or lower than the other ADP and ECRs?
First of all, I would wager that Jermaine Burton's mom and him himself are higher on him than I am. So I'm no greater than third.
Planet, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, not highest on the planet. I'm like third.
I want to see if they draft him in their redraft leagues, but go ahead.
Ouch.
At any rate, I think my next answer technically would be Adonai Mitchell, not someone who I would have them in about the same tier. But I believe, he's well undrafted and redraft at the current moment. Look, but I think he's an incredibly talented player. I definitely, with the Anthony Richardson concerns, with the passing game concerns, I get the risk. But as far as a talent, I think there are receivers he's much more talented than, going much earlier than he is. So as far as EDP or ADP is concerned, I think that is my biggest gap and higher.
Okay, Donnie Mitchell. How about you, Dan?
The rookie I have the greatest, and it's bigger than Jaden Daniels, I have the greatest ADP difference on is actually Brian Thomas Jr. I have him ranked at 96 overall, plus 21 spots over ECR, plus 25 spots over the ADP. Look, he could easily start the year as the 3rd highest targeted pass catcher within that offense, given Kirk's, Christian Kirk, that is, and Evan Ingram's history of not really scoring a ton of touchdowns, even as lead targeted wide receivers. I really wouldn't be surprised if we saw Brian Thomas be the lead receiver for touchdowns of that Jaguars offense this season. So I have the biggest difference on him according to ADP.
All right. Now, how about you, Chase? What ADP difference do you have for a player that you might like or dislike?
I am going to duck all of the accusations of this being a hater pick just because he's in division, but it's JJ McCarthy for me. I have him at quarterback 35 right now. He's going off the board as like quarterback 21. I'm 14 spots lower than him. How the hell anybody has him going as a quarterback 2 when he's not even going to start the season and may not start at all this season, or if he does, it'll be very late in the season, is beyond me. Why you guys are all taking him, not you guys necessarily, but why he's going as quarterback 21, it shocks me. Darnold has already basically won that job himself. They have a plan, and all they have to do is look a short 4-hour drive to the east to Green Bay to see how well it behooves a team to let that guy develop even if you draft him high, even if you draft him in the 1st round. Let that guy develop for a while. Don't stick him in there to the Wolves. It's a team that isn't going anywhere anyway. They have no reason to stick that guy in there. It's going to be Darnold's job longer than anybody wants it to be. So I am not touching JJ McCarthy with a 10-foot pole in redraft. Dynasty-wise, different story.
That's terrible.
I like it, Chase. We talked about JJ McCarthy. Obviously, you're not excited about what he can do this year, and I'm with you. That was actually the guy that I had as well. I think he's the guy that I don't even know why we're talking about JJ McCarthy this year in any kind of capacity. I don't think he's going to be a guy who's going to be relevant fantasy-wise anytime soon, maybe next year, maybe 2 years, but right now isn't a guy that I expect to see at the field anytime soon.
It really, really sucks. Water sucks.
He does suck. All right, so let's speed it up a little bit. Let's kind of get some rapid answers here for you. Let's look at some of our second-year players. And we're going to talk about some of the second-year guys that we think are going to have that we're looking to target for our teams. What are some of the second-year guys that you have are targeting most for your fantasy redrafts this year. We'll start off with Chase, but we'll work her back the other way around.
Bijan, because he's about the only one whose ADP really lines up with the value that I believe he has. And that might be an easy pick, but like I said, his value, perceived value to me, lines up exactly with where I think he's going in drafts. I'm not going to have to pay up or reach for him. If I take him, I'm getting him right where I think I should be getting him, which is right there in the middle of the first round, early to mid first round. So I will be, in terms of targeting, Bijan.
Captain Obvious. It's another obvious answer for me. It's Dalton Kincaid. Look, when you're looking for an elite tight end, the biggest key besides touchdown, which is always a factor for tight ends, but you need somebody who has the pathway to be the number one pass catcher on that team. Dalton Kincaid has that pathway, no matter what we think about him, no matter what's going on in Buffalo, to be the lead target for that team. And that's why I like Dalton Kincaid a lot. And we can get him for a 5th round, 6th round pick. He kind of breaks off that tier for me of the top 5 tight ends. You don't have to pay up for the 2nd, 3rd round like you do for the Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, and Trey McBride right now are kind of going that high. So that's, for me, is Dalton Kincaid.
All right, Adam, what guy are you looking for the second-year breakout are you targeting?
Well, I'm going to go directly against what you said in our segment, and I am willing to gamble on Anthony Richardson. And look, I completely understand the not wanting to. I think it's just, look, call it homerism. I get it, whatever. I think to me it's just difference in risk aversion. I am going to gamble a lot in drafts. That's the same thing with Jermaine Burton. I'd just rather have a gamble than a roster clogger at the end of a draft. Right. And that's my personal play style. I take a lot of dart throws. I also join a lot of leagues. So I'm not that concerned about, risk, because some are going to hit. But at any rate,
if you're okay doing a super fragile build, he's a great, I actually can't see it, but I have his name written down right there. So no, you're not wrong in saying you want to, but I don't know if I'm targeting him.
Right. And maybe being a Colts fan is what puts it over from a very good gamble to also I'm going to target him. And that's, a very, very fair. But also like the physical aspects, seeing what I saw on a points per game basis, and just knowing how weak the quarterback position was last year. I think that there's, a lot of ways that could go, but there's certainly, a timeline in which he could end as a top 3 quarterback and actually beat the ADP. There's also a timeline in which he plays 3 games, and that's, a risk I'm willing to take personally.
So I like the drop. I like it. The guy that I'm going to go with is, we talked about this guy earlier in the show, referring to the guy we did not like, in Zach Moss. I'm going to go with Chase Brown. I think Chase Brown's value is outstanding, a guy that you can pretty much get in the teens, a guy who I think could actually wind up being the bell cow of the backfield sooner than later, better pass catcher of the backfield than Zach Moss, more explosive than Zach Moss. So Chase Brown's a guy that I've been finding myself as my RB4, RB5, who I think is just is a sweet guy to have on your team because we have a huge upside and for the stretch run, and also be a guy that you don't have to reach for and get your hands on. All right, so let's go for a more current. Let's kind of wrap it up with these last 2 questions from my part. And the last 2 questions, first of all, where are you guys looking at some of the players that you're making sure that you get your hands on, a glue player? We know Adam has Jermaine Burton on probably all his teams, whether it's whatever he's drafting, PPR, full point PPR, half PPR. But when we're talking about half point PPR, that we usually do on this show, who is that core player or a guy that you are making sure that you must have for your team? And, just kind of throw this out here. Let's try to avoid going guys like a Bijan Robinson in the first round because, depending on what pick you have, you're probably not going to get that guy. But let's
you asked about targets. I don't listen.
I love
the first round is about the only round I actually try to target anybody in, because if I'm trying to lock myself into taking a player later, I may be missing out on a player at better value who falls. I don't want to lock myself into anything and have like the overarching plan going into the draft that I'm going to stick to no matter what the hell happens. And then if I wind up taking a dude in the 4th who I should have been waiting for the 7th or 8th round to take. So yeah, in terms of a guy that I was targeting, Bijan would be a guy that I'm targeting in the first round and actually actively going out and seeking. Past that, I don't necessarily like to lock myself into guys. So
Okay. So, Dan, we'll go to you for this question as well.
Yes.
You're looking at a player that you want to kind of have as your glue player. And, I understand you're saying, Chase, don't lock yourself in, but there's usually some guys that you have a good idea where the value is.
Oh, yeah.
Is there some guys, Dan, that you have as that glue player, a guy like is going to probably be on the board for you that you're going to be having most of your rosters if you're drafting?
Well, a glue player is a core player. A core player, typically speaking, is going somewhere in the first couple of rounds, second, third, fourth round in particular, after you get out of the first round, which is, of course, usually your main player. I have two guys. One guy I talk about all the time, which is Chris Olave. So I don't want to talk about Chris Olave on this show, but I am going to go to the guy I've ranked just one spot below him, and that's Drake London. Look, I don't understand the people out there who have suddenly cooled off on the idea like, well, Drake London, there's a lot of questions about his production over the past couple of years, acting like there hasn't been Arthur Smith and Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ritter he's had to deal with in the process. It makes absolutely no sense to me. Read the room, guys. Kirk Cousins is there. Zach Robinson's there. If Kirk Cousins can't go, now we have Michael Penix there. I mean, the guy had 117 targets, 110 targets in his first 2 years on a run-first, shoddy quarterback play team. Of all the guys that I'm predicting to take one of the biggest target jumps this season, it is Drake London, where he should be at plus 140 within that offense, given the lack of other pass catchers besides Kyle Pitts around him. So to me, Drake London, a guy that you're drafting in the second round, some even drafting in the third round, because again, there's people trying to push this narrative that there's question marks about his production. That's a glue player for me that you can get there on a pivot.
Adam, you have a glue guy that you're looking at.
Yeah, for me, it's DJ Moore. I have him like closing in on double-digit spots above ECR. I love DJ Moore this year. I will go out on the record to go as far as to say I believe right now he's at 20.5 point PPR on the ECR. I think it's more likely that he is a wide receiver 1 in a 12 team than he is in the 20s. That, to me, 20 is ridiculous. I can see in the mid-teens, and that's fine. I can accept that. 20 is ridiculous. DJ Moore is going to improve upon last year because Caleb Williams is a massive improvement over Justin Fields. And I like Justin Fields a lot. But Caleb Williams is a massive leap forward. So for me, he's someone who I love in the first couple rounds as a wide receiver option.
I like it. So for myself, it's going to be David Montgomery as a guy that I find that, is almost always there around 6 or 7, a guy who has potential to be an RB2 in your lineup, but you don't necessarily spend that draft capital. One of the guys, when we get into those lower tiers of running backs, I have less questions about than other guys. I'm not worried about his carries, not worried about him splitting touches with somebody. I already got a good idea what's going to happen, and this guy's going to get a lot of touchdowns. So I like David Montgomery as a guy that I've been able to kind of get consistently as, if you're trying to stretch around, trying to not go with the RBs early option. He's a guy that you can feel safe having as your RB2, but also like a guy, like I said, if he's my RB3 or 4, I'm feeling really good.
If there's a guy that I'm gunning for not in the first round, it would be Michael Lynn Evans III down in Tampa Bay. 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, book it.
Well, so for that,
that's the floor. Take that.
Okay, I like
take
that.
As when he's going as wide receiver 16 through 19. Take that.
So that brings us to our final question, which is a 2-parter. First of all, who is that player that you are targeting or you're trying to get as that game winner, as that, this guy's, I think, based on the value, based on if I get him on my team, this guy could win it all for me. Who's that guy that you're aiming for? And the second part of the question will be, name, if you can, a duo that might be able to do what Puka Nacua and Kyrie Williams did last year, where they came out of nowhere, basically first or second year players coming off, both drafted fifth round or later, and were able to be fantasy relevant and super productive. So the 2-part question, number 1 is who's the guy that you're trying to target to make sure that, this guy's going to bring me a championship this year, and who's the guys that maybe could be those surprise guys that maybe you add on your waivers after the season starts.
I'll start it off. James Conner has been a top 10 running back in points per game each of the last 3 seasons, ever since he walked into Arizona. You guys hate on him.
I don't.
The man can play some freaking football. He's good in that offense. They're going to be a better offense this year passing the ball, which means less pressure on him. James Conner, top 10 running back in points per game each of the last 3 seasons, and you guys all discount him.
Chase, do you have a guy that for a duo that might be able to do what Kyron and Puka did last year, off the radar guys?
It might not necessarily be, first year, both of them first year guys, But
first and second year guys.
Caleb Williams and Roshan Johnson in Chicago could turn that on. I could see DeAndre Swift didn't do anything special when he was in one of the best offenses in the league last season in Philadelphia. It's no guarantee he holds on to that job or takes the bulk of the carries even in that job all season too. So by the end of the season,
I'm going to have to disqualify your question to answer for this one because I'm sorry, Caleb Williams is not one of the options. Kyron Williams was drafted in the 5th round. Puka Nacua was drafted in the 5th round.
Okay, listen, late ass round pick.
So Dan, I think Roshan Johnson's an option, but that's not 2 players. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I'll just answer your second part first. 0. There's nobody in a position to put up a Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams and what they were able to do last season. You'd have to get all the fairy dust in the world to make up a scenario where that's even coming close. But to answer your first question, the guy who I've been targeting as a guy who I think could actually legitimately be a league winner, and I think it's going to shock some people, is Ramondre Stevenson. They paid this guy to give him all the work in the world. And look, I hate Scott Van Pelt as much as the next person, but what does he come from? A system that just features the hell out of the running back. And when you melt that in with the idea that Stevenson is going 58th overall, as RB19 overall, I have him as a top 12 running back right now. I am big on the idea Ramondre Stevenson can give you that full package as your RB2, wind up being an RB1, and carry you through with the value that we're talking about here, because the volume's going to be insane for Ramondre this season. He is the offense for the New England Patriots, which I do think won't be great, but will be better than what we had last season.
We're going to blow the whistle and throw a flag on you real quick, Dan, because you jumped all over Chris for getting Justin Tolbert's name wrong. Scott Van Pelt, the ESPN host of the late night show, has nothing to do with the New England offense. But Alex Van Pelt, all of your points would hold completely.
Fine. Alex Van Pelt, you're right. You got me.
I like it. And Dan says there's no chance of the Kyron and Puka thing happening again. Adam.
I was gonna say Ramondre as well, or not Ramondre. Sorry.
That's what your reaction for as well. I was like, what? Adam actually disagrees with that pick.
No, I was gonna say Raheem Mostert as far as a guy that I really like going in. But what I will say, as far as to humor your late round guy question,
thank you.
Let me throw out Tyrone Tracy Jr., who I think has a shot in the dark for that backfield, just given the lack of talent. And I do believe in him as a talent. And Kendre Miller, a second year. And I know he was more of a early mid guy, but he had a pretty quiet rookie year behind an aging Alvin Kamara, a guy who hasn't really gotten anything important done on the ground in a while now. And it wouldn't shock me that much to see Kendre Miller, close that gap there. And do I think it's going to happen that he has some blow up year? No, but do I think it's within the realm of possibility? Absolutely.
All right. So Adam's going with guys on 2 different teams, but I like the players that she kind of mentioned. And I like the player we talked about as game changer for you. For me, it's Cooper Kupp. I talked about this a lot. I'm not going to go too much and far into it. A guy I get in 4th round right now who had been one of the top receivers you could have for 3 or 4 straight years. He's healthy. He's been healthy all off season. Him and Matthew Stafford are back together on the same clicking. To me, if you can get this kind of guy in the 3rd or 4th round, to me is a game changer that I'm definitely going to get my hands on. And to humor myself for the question, Adam, I'm a little down on Jermaine Burton. I'm not as high on him as you are. So my guys, I'm going to go with his Chase Brown and Andre. Make sure I say his name correctly. Yosivas. I think this guy's been taking a lot of snaps with that first team. We talked about different guys taking first team snaps. What that means, it doesn't mean. But I do know that a lot of things have been positive about this guy since he got drafted by Cincinnati. A guy that I liked a lot last year who got on the field for the team last year. And then Chase Brown, as I talked about, I think he can still Zach Moss's job. So there's 2 guys I think, if something happens to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, we were seeing with his injury concerns. There's a similar offense as the Rams that was able to do it. So maybe this team could do it as well.
All right. With that closes up Chris's segment here. So, Chase, why don't you give us one more live read, bud, and then take us into your last segment of the show.
All right. Once again, ladies and gentlemen out there, hey, ready to take your fantasy sports game to the next level? Welcome to the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. It is your ultimate destination for everything fantasy and sports gaming. You can escape the noise and negativity of fantasy sports Twitter and Reddit and say goodbye to bots and ads. And welcome to a space where genuine sports talk thrives. Immerse yourself in a new area of fantasy sports discussions where quality insights and pure enthusiasm reign supreme. None of that other BS. Elevate your fantasy experience. Join us on this exciting journey. We've got everything from football to basketball, baseball, and beyond. All your favorite games are covered, whether you're a hardcore enthusiast or a casual player, something for everybody. There's polls, there's league classifieds. You can chat directly with ourselves and more of your favorite fantasy content providers there, and just fans like yourself there. So get on over there. It's all right there. Articles, videos, podcasts, right at your fingertips. Boost your game with expert advice, earn points, receive rewards for your sports expertise. Your insights will make a real impact there. Join a vibrant community of like-minded fans, share your draft strategies, discuss winning tactics, dominate your fantasy leagues together. It's more than just a network. It's a dynamic team driven by passion and knowledge. So join us today and unleash your fantasy sports potential. Visit fantasysportsadvicenetwork.com now and download our app to start your winning streak. And with that, we move to our last segment of the day, which we are going to call Plant Your Flag, in which we examine hard to read team position groups and we take a stand. Like Baker Mayfield at Ohio State, we are going to be bold and plant our flag in the middle of the field there. But like George Teague taking out T.O. when he tried to plant his flag on the star at Dallas Stadium there, the rest of us can come for you if your take sucks here. So round one here, first of two questions. We're going to look at that Chargers wide receiver room that Nino Peno wanted us to look at earlier. Josh Palmer going as wide receiver 60. Quentin Johnston going as wide receiver 71. Ladd McConkey going as wide receiver 42. DJ Chark is there going as wide receiver 84. No one seems to know exactly what's going to happen in this group. Who leads this group? And will you have him on any of your rosters? Why or why not? Let's start with Adam. Who leads this Chargers wide receiver group, and will you have him on your roster?
I think it's Ladd McConkey. I think anyone I liked Johnston coming into the draft. Anyone who gives him as the answer after the camp he's had so far and after last season is out of their damn minds. So let's get that out of the way, just so we're clear there. But yeah, I have Ladd McConkey, and I have him at about ECR. I think he's someone who I might inch up a little bit, and he's definitely someone that I'm willing to have on my rosters and actually will be actively targeting towards the end of drafts.
All right, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's Ladd McConkey. I have him right there at ADP. DJ Chark, just to hit the Quentin Johnston thing, has been playing well ahead of Quentin Johnston the entire camp. It hasn't even been close, according to reports there. So that's Quentin Johnston's pretty much out of the question at this point. But if there's going to be one guy, I'll throw this twist out here where I'm probably going to own the most, it's probably going to be Josh Palmer, because he's the guy who I actually have ranked 10 spots ahead of ADP right now. Not that I'm not going to take McConkey at value, but Palmer's the one I have a little bit ahead, so I'm going to be more lenient to take him when we're talking about that wide receiver 5 tier. The fact is there aren't too many wide receiver 5s, wide receiver 6s who have the upside of potentially being the lead target on their team, even if I think it's going to be McConkey, who had to deal with some injuries there in Georgia too, so that could lead to that being an issue as well. So Palmer's probably going to own more, but I would say McConkey leads the way.
All right, Chris, let's go to you. Who leads this wide receiver room, and will you have him on your roster?
I think ultimately Chase him by the season end. It's going to be Ladd McConkey for sure. I think he's the most talented guy. I think he's the guy who's replacing Keenan Allen, and we saw how well Justin Herbert was able to feed him. It was a different offense, but we see different offenses still be able to feed Keenan Allen in that slot position. I think there's a good chance I will own him, although we draft with each other, maybe not. I do like Ladd McConkey as a guy, as Dan talked about, as that home run swing towards the end of the rounds, a little bit more than Jimmy Burton. So I am definitely going to probably have Ladd McConkey on my team. But I will say Palmer will be a guy that I won't be drafting, but I probably will have, because it's probably one of the primary waiver wire pickups week 1, week 2, depending on what happens in that Chargers game with the Raiders. So I think Palmer is that guy that I'll be scouting off. I won't be drafting him, but he's a guy there's a good chance I'll be own at some point this season.
Yeah, listen, Lad McConkey is a guy that I have come around on. I was not as high on him in the pre-draft process as you guys were, but coming into as we head into the season here, the more I see of him, the more I look at this team, the more I like him. I am one spot away from drafting in a rookie draft right now, and I'm hoping that the dude in front of me is not watching this show because I am hoping that Lad falls to me at number 12 right now. I'm hoping against hope right now because he's the best wide receiver that's available out there. I have him better than Xavier Worthy. I have him better than Brian Thomas, and I liked Brian Thomas coming in. So I like me some Lad McConkey. I'm willing to take a shot on him when he's going off the board at wide receiver 42 because there is a real chance for him to far outperform that. I'm not overly thrilled about the idea of a Greg Roman offense, but if you can be a number one wide receiver for Justin Herbert, I think that there's a lot of value to be had there. So Lad is probably the guy that I will be taking most out of this group, but I love Dan's take on Josh Palmer because I think Josh Palmer is being very discounted in this entire discussion, and I think he deserves a little bit more credit than what he's being given. Round 2 here, we're going to talk about the Vikings quarterback room. You all know my take on it already. I do not like J.J. McCarthy. I think Sam Darnold takes this job. I think he holds on to it longer than anybody wants him to. Probably longer than I even want him to, because I think that he's better for the Vikings in this season than J.J. McCarthy would be. But who do we think ultimately takes more snaps for that fourth place team in the NFC North? And does that choice of quarterback change your valuation of Justin Jefferson? Let's start with you, Dan, on that one.
Yeah, well, it doesn't change anything for Justin Jefferson. Just to reiterate, weeks 15 through 18 without Kirk Cousins, he was the wide receiver 4. He was on pace for 2,000 yards. Granted, yes, he played the Lions twice within that stretch, but he also had Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins throwing him the football. So, no, it doesn't affect me when it comes to Justin Jefferson at all. Now, Jordan Addison, yeah, it does affect me a little bit when it comes to Jordan Addison. As far as, yes, I do think Sam Darnold is going to start week 1. J.J. McCarthy is going to take over at some point in this team because this team's not going to be a playoff contending team. They're not going to wait until next year to get J.J. McCarthy snaps. I think by the end of it, he will have the most snaps. Just looking at Minnesota's schedule right off the rip, they got a bye week in week 6, right?
Yep.
Other than the Giants week 1, I don't know if they really have a chance to win any other game after that. San Francisco week 2, the Texans week 3, Packers week 4, and the Jets, assuming Aaron Rodgers is still healthy, week 5. So there's a very good chance this team's 1-5 heading into their bye week or 1-4 heading into their bye week in week 6 here. I'd be surprised if McCarthy doesn't come out and be the starter after that at the very minimum.
All right, Chris, what's your take on this? Who takes the most snaps, and does it change your valuation of Justin Jefferson?
I think if Sam Darnold takes the most snaps, it does not change Justin Jefferson, as Dan alluded to. I don't care who's throwing the ball. The water boy could throw the ball to Justin Jefferson. I'm still confident putting my lineup. But what I am concerned about is I don't think the Vikings are going to be a bad team, Dan. I hear what you're saying, and I know Chase is down on the Vikings haven't finished 4th in the division. I think this team got better defensively. I love their coaches staff on both sides. Then they got better players to use for both these coaches. So they were very competitive last year. I think this team can be competitive again this year, which they keep Sam Darnold on the quarterback position because there's no reason necessarily if they get J.J. McCarthy out there if you're in playoff striking distance. So I do think McCarthy is a guy who's not getting a lot of snaps now, a guy who's going to continue to have to get more and more snaps, a guy who I thought was raw. We heard a lot of things about how pro-ready his offense was. I think it was all BS, and I realized that Jason McCarthy has to work a lot to get better as a pro. And I think he won't be necessarily this year, but next year he'll probably be the guy.
All right, Adam, let us hear it.
I've been off the wall a lot this show, saying things far outside of standard, but I almost exactly echo the sentiments of Dan here, both in regard to Justin Jefferson and the quarterback situation, and even down to the bye week being a target changeover date. The only additional thing for me to add here that he didn't already state really well is that Kevin O'Connell has already shown that he's a guy, in the Dobbs situation who I think he is of the school of thought where the best way to learn is by actively doing something, by actively playing quarterback. I don't think Kevin O'Connell thinks that the best way for McCarthy to learn to be the Vikings quarterback is to sit on the bench. I think Kevin O'Connell thinks that playing is going to be the way to actually teach him to be the Vikings quarterback. So I think that Darnold will start. I don't think that lasts very long, especially if the losses pile up, kind of, as Dan alluded to.
That is a very good point that you make about the fact that he was not afraid to change quarterbacks last season, and in an attempt to keep things going. It worked out awesome for him. I will add in there, but no, listen. I agree with everybody that, this does not change Justin Jefferson one iota. Listen, he was wide receiver 5 points per game last season with that absolute train wreck that he had at quarterback, after the Cousins injury. But again, I still think that it behooves them to let JJ McCarthy develop and learn. They're not having to pay everybody a ton of money this season. I think it's Darnold. I think he takes more snaps than McCarthy. I do think McCarthy plays this season some. I think Darnold is the one who takes more snaps this season. I will plant my flag on that. And with that, I'm running out of beer, so it's time for us to move on with that. Dan, take it away.
Yeah, that's going to wrap it up for the show. So we got a couple of things to cover here before we get out. First and foremost, if you're going to the Fantasy Football Expo, look for us. Operation Domination, the full crew here. Adam, Chase, Chris, myself, we're all going to be there supporting Fantasy Football Advice Network, the number one sponsors of the Expo. We're going to be there from Thursday all the way through Monday. So check us out. We'll be really visible throughout the entire weekend. Make sure you check out the panels and the poker tournaments and the parties and everything else in between, and you're checking out fantasysportsadvice.com. We're really going to be pushing the fact that you can join a fantasy football social media platform now with that. But with the Expo coming up and travel dates and all of that, we will not have a show next week. We're going to take a little bit of a week off. We're going to come back the following week with a show. So we'll be back hopefully that following Wednesday at our normal time at 9:30 and be full gear getting you guys ready, because that's going to be the epitome of draft season right freaking there, guys. So make sure you're checking us out on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Network. Make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast app. We're available on every podcast app that you listen to. Give us a follow on social media. Another thing to get in the books here, Operation Domination social handles are no more. You have to just go to at FF Advice Network on every social media platform to get a hold of us and follow along. So make sure you guys go ahead and check that out. And with all that, we'll see you in a couple weeks, or hopefully you can get your butt over the can, and we'll see you in person then. Take care. Hey there, I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to at FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you. Am I the only one seeing end stream still going live here? The fuck is going on? Hey there, I want to thank you for watching Operation